In just a few hours from me making this video, we are going to see some maintenance happen in Master Duel at the end of the day on July the 12th. And by the time the game comes back online, July the 13th, we're going to have some new cards and a new selection pack in the game. And if you're like me, and you've been following the leaks, you've already pre-constructed your Labyrinth deck in anticipation for some of the big cards coming. That is, of course, Lady Labyrinth of the Silver Castle, Muckraker from the Underworld, and Big Welcome Labyrinth as well. These cards will shake up the meta. Labyrinth will become pretty much tier 1, tier 2. It does play a lot differently in Master Duel than it does in the TCG, because obviously we don't have 3 of Floodgates in Master Duel as we do in the TCG. But the deck is still very powerful. Let's take a look at Big Welcome Labyrinth first. Special summon 1 Labyrinth monster from your deck, hand deck, or graveyard, then return 1 monster you control to the hand. That's the first effect when you activate it on field. So you notice in my build right away I'm playing 1 of each of the furniture monsters. These can easily be fetched out with 1 of 3 copies of Big Welcome Labyrinth and then bounce back to your hand so that you can use their effects. The Cool Clock allows you to activate a trap card that was set this turn. The Stovey fetches a spell or trap, and same with Chandelier, and then they have follow-up effects. Once they're in the graveyard they can recur themselves, which give you that card advantage. The second effect of Big Welcome Labyrinth says you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 fiend monster you control. Or if you control a level 8 or higher fiend monster, you can target 1 card your opponent controls instead, return that target to the hand. You can only use 1 Big Welcome Labyrinth effect per turn, and only once that turn. So if you use the effect to summon and bounce, you can't use the effect to banish and bounce in the same turn. But this is a trap card. You use 1 effect during your opponent's turn, you use 1 effect during your turn, for example, right? It's pretty self-explanatory. This is a very good card, and it will help Labyrinth deal with a lot, obviously. The big thing with this is you're going to use it with Lady Labyrinth. This is a level 8 or higher fiend. It's 3000 attack. It's very hard to beat over. When you control a set card, your opponent can't target this card with card effects, and it can't be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So it's almost like a Towers. You can only use each of the following effects of Lady Labyrinth once per turn. So if a Labyrinth card or effect or a normal trap card was activated this turn, except itself, quick effect, special summon this card from your hand. So you can already see the synergy, right? Big Welcome can special this out, bring it back to hand. You use any other trap, normal trap, or Labyrinth effect, this card gets re-special summoned to the field, right? In defense position. When a normal trap card is activated, when this card is on the field, you can quick effect set another normal trap directly from your deck. So you can already see the synergy. If you're able to set up, you bring this out on the field, a trap card is activated, you set, let's say, the one of Eradicator. If you have Cool Clock, quick effect, discard this card, this turn you activate your Cool Clock the turn it was set. Super, super powerful. So this is the kind of interactions you're going to see with Labyrinth moving forward. There's a lot of intricacies with this deck. One of the hardest things with this deck, honestly, in the TCG is people cannot keep track of all of the effects and resolve all of the effects as needed. In Master Duel, since all that stuff is kind of triggered for you and you're kind of told, hey, do you want to do this, do you want to do that? This deck will be likely piloted by more players who have that advantage going for them. They have not having to worry about keeping track of all the different effects, and Labyrinth not necessarily plays itself, but a lot of the effects you won't forget to activate or forget that, oh hey, my card is really untargetable, you can't do that. The game is going to automatically keep track of all that stuff for you. Now in my version, you can see, again, like I mentioned, you're playing 1 of each of the furniture because they're easily searchable and bounceable with the Big Welcome, which you will play 3 of. Playing 3 Ariana still, again, because it's also a target off Welcome Labyrinth. You can choose if you want to play Lava Golems as a board breaker for going second. You don't necessarily need this, but we are still in kind of a monster heavy format. This deals with tier limit cards, deals with Bestials, right? You imagine the opponent has Beast and Regain set up. If you can just out their Bestial monsters right away, it turns off their Beast. That can be very helpful. But if they have Regain when you summon, they're going to get a Bestial back anyways. But again, you summon, they trigger the Regain, you Lava Golem their stuff, they lose out on their Beast, for example, right? And hopefully you special summon, obviously, because this card takes up your normal summon. You're down to 1 Lady now because you don't need more than 1. This card is your grind game card. It resets your traps. You could play 2, but you don't want to run into bricking it. The card you're going to be playing 2 of is Lovely now. 3 Lord of the Heavenly Prison, just because, again, this is another way to protect your back row as well as extend for setting more spells and traps from your deck. So you could play 2, but you definitely want to play at least 2. I wouldn't opt not to play this. Yes, it is an ultra rare. This deck is going to be a little expensive. Pot of Duality, because again, you may not special summon during some turns, so this card can be useful. You know, these cards do conflict a little bit, so again, you can choose which engine you want to play. The Pot of Prosperity should be included no matter what, in my opinion. It's just too good not to include. Only one field spell, again, searchable off Ariana, which is searchable off Welcome. 3 Super Poly. Again, you can opt not to play the board breakers if you don't want to, and you may not need to play both Lava Golem and Super Poly. I'm just showing you this in the deck as examples, because obviously I'm at 37, and if the goal is to add 2 ladies, that's going to put me at 39, and you're also going to need 3 big welcomes, which is going to put you at 42. So you're going to need to play 40 in this deck for sure, just as an FYI. The Compulses in Master Duel, I think you will play this. In TCG, they've cut it for more efficient cards, but again, they're dealing with a totally different limitation list than we are. Compulse is still very good. It's a very powerful interruption still. Compulsing an extra deck monster or something can really make or break the opponent's board. You can opt to play Deck Devastation or not. This card is an auto win against Sprite, for example. It does hurt you against tier limits because it will trigger their fusions. It will trigger Kelbeck, Yugioh, those kinds of things. But this card obviously also deals with hand traps. It gets Ash out of the way, Max C's, etc. But that's another benefit of this deck, is that you don't really lose to Max C because you're special summoning just maybe once or twice a turn anyways, if any. So Max C isn't going to completely shut you off like it would with other decks. Eradicator was already preemptively limited. This is forcing you to use Lady basically to search it out, or Lord of the Heavenly Prison. But if you do resolve the Eradicator, obviously it can be very, very powerful. 2-Dimensional Barrier, just because extra deck decks are everywhere right now. You need to shut off fusions, you need to shut off synchros. Very, very powerful card, obviously, in being a floodgate. So just being able to shut off an opponent's turn, like this card pretty much is an auto win against tier limits. It skips their whole turn basically, right? So they have to have, tier limits has to have some other way to play without getting out their big fusion monsters if they do get Dimensional Barriered. This card deals with Sword Soul, which right now is the 3rd best deck in the format. It can help deal with Sprite if you don't have the Deck Devastation or you're not playing it right. Shut off the Xyz summon of the Gigantic. It won't stop their links like Elf and Sprint, but it can shut off the Xyzes. It can stop you from getting Zeused as well. Very, very important card. The Dogmatic of Punishment is kind of self-explanatory. These, again, they do conflict a little bit, so you can kind of think about how you want to synergize your deck. If you're playing Super Poly targets, you also need to play Dogmatic of Punishment targets if you're playing this card as well. So your Super Poly targets might be things like Garua, Mud Dragon, Starving Venom, Dragostapelia. You might even put a branded or tier limit card in there, like Kaleido Heart, or maybe not Mirror Jade, but like Albion or Lubellion, even, just to deal with the Albaz cards on field or something. But if you're playing Dogmatic of Punishment, you want cards that have value when they're sent to the graveyard, and you need high attack value monsters usually. So you're going to play Entis, you're going to play Fossil Skull, Wagon, and Knight. You're going to play Wind Pegasus. You're going to play probably one 5-headed dragon, just for the fact that it's 5,000 attack. And the new card, Bucephalus. This card is good because when it's sent to the graveyard, you can send another card from your extra deck to the graveyard. So if your opponent has a big monster on field, let's say you out it with a Dogmatic of Punishment, you send this, and then you can send a Garua for a draw 1, because you're likely not sending Garua off punishment since it's such a low attack stat. So Garua has double function in this deck, both as a Super Poly target and a Dogmatic of Punishment target when you send the Bucephalus. Moving along here, 3 Welcome Labyrinth. I think you still want to play 3, just because it summons out your big boss monsters and it summons out Ariana. So it's literally like one of your best engine cards in the deck still. So I think you still want to max out on 3. Tears of the Overroot is kind of up in the air. It does target, which is a downside, or an upside, depending on how you look at it. If you watch my videos talking about how targeting versus chainable negates and stuff works, they have their benefits and their cons. But if you go first with Labyrinth, likely you're winning every match, just because opponents, until they start playing more back row removal, and even if they are, I mean, you got Lord of the Heavenly Prison, so if you draw that, you're pretty safe. But these cards really do disrupt the opponent quite heavily. It literally can shut down a combo line at a critical point after the opponent's committed resources. It can do a lot to disrupt your opponent. Likewise, Solemn Strike, kind of in the same vein. This card, the fact that it negates a monster effect when a monster would be special summon or a monster effect is activated. So again, negate a special summon or a monster effect, super, super strong, right? It deals with pretty much every card, every monster card, every meta deck in the game right now. and then you play your floodgates, right? If you see these, they can likely just be a GG against a deck. Very, very hard to overcome. There Can Only Be One is probably the best floodgate, to be honest, but obviously you would suffer from that card as well. Not as hard as you would think, because you can survive with just one fiend on board, but you probably don't play There Can Only Be One. So the last card for the extra deck that's also coming to Master Duel that you probably want to play is Muckracker. So this card is important because it's a fiend, 2 effect monsters, weak attack, but you care about the effect. You don't care about that it can't be used as link material, that doesn't matter. If monsters you control would be destroyed by battle of the card effect, tribute 1 fiend monster instead. So again, you've got recurable fiend monsters in the Labyrinth cards, you've got like Arianas that can be tributed, ladies that can be tributed and brought back with field spell, etc. So that's usually not a problem. You can save the cards you need, tribute the cards you don't need. You can target 1 fiend monster in your graveyard except Muckracker, discard a card, and special summon that monster. So again, it has the natural recurability. Bring back critical Labyrinth monsters. Say if you lose your field spell, you still have a way to recur your monsters from the graveyard. Special summon that monster, and if you do, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except fiend monsters. Okay, that doesn't matter because you're only using fiends anyways. And yeah, that's the effect. So it can have a lot of utility in the deck, just having it in there as an extra deck monster. Again, Labyrinth, when it has control of the match, you usually end up putting a couple bodies on board anyways, and then just being able to link into an actual utility card from the extra deck can be beneficial. So with that being said, there are a number of different ways you can play Labyrinth. Obviously, like I said, you can put in like the extravagances and not care about your extra deck, but then you probably take out super polys, and your dogmatic punishments become worse with extravagance, but you do gain the +2 off of that as well. Because Labyrinth is a deck that doesn't necessarily need the extra deck, but if you are making utilization of the extra deck, it makes it a lot stronger in my opinion, just because Super Poly is such a good board breaker in the format right now. You do have to worry about Bestials, because obviously these cards are dark. Again, you are playing Gozen match and you're expecting to be locked into dark. So you do need a proper setup in order to avoid the Bestials. But again, your trap card should hopefully help you deal with those, but it is something you have to worry about. So with that being said, that's pretty much the deck. How does it play into the rest of the meta? Well, if we just quickly take a look here, obviously my deck is Floowandereeze. It does beat Floowandereeze when it goes first, simply because these birds can't handle back row decks. If I need to go first and set up unexplored winds, and my like Apex Avian negates in order to start tributing over your back row during your turn and negating your cards. If you go first, my cards don't do much. That being said, Evenly Matched is a card. You don't play Ash. So if I draw into my pot cards and I'm able to get into an Evenly Matched, if you're not playing Solemn Judgment, right, Evenly Matched can win you games against Labyrinth. So this deck isn't necessarily completely dead, but Labyrinth is very, very strong going first against Floowandereeze. That being said, it also Dimensional Shifter or Dimension Shifter, prevents the cards from going to graveyard. So things like Big Welcome, which have additional effects to banish, or Welcome Labyrinth, which has the effect to reset itself. If those cards get banished under Shifter, that's super advantageous for Floowandereeze as well. If you take a look at Tearlaments, Labyrinth does struggle because you don't want to destroy the Tearlaments cards because it triggers their effects. That being said though, Lady Labyrinth will beat over pretty much everything, and the trap cards should be able to negate the effects, things like Solemn Strike, etc. And then Floodgates will stop them as well, keeping them locked into like Warrior if they've summoned Rhino, preventing the Aqua fusions, locking them into Aqua, preventing the Kaleido Heart, for example. It can be very, very strong. If they've committed to, the fusion, you can lock them into like a Dragostapelia. Again, I'm kind of functioning under like rivalry, but Gozen Match and Skill Drain obviously are very strong against them. But you will struggle a little bit against Tearlaments. It will be a very good matchup though. It will be an interesting back and forth match. Bestial branded, I think this match is really coin flip dependent. If the Bestial branded deck is able to go first and set up the Regained and Beast engine, the Beast engine just gives them so much advantage, and then when you summon they bring back Bestial cards, and like I said, the Bestial cards will banish like the One of Furniture cards, the Lovely, the Lady when they go to grave. It can just outgrind the Labyrinth cards by outing their monsters, which makes it very hard for Labyrinth to come back. The traps alone aren't going to win you the game. The traps are to help you control the match. So against branded Bestial, it is kind of a toss-up. If we take a look at Dragon Link, it's a little bit the same because of the Bestial cards, but I think that this deck, when it goes first, can set up enough disruption that it makes it a lot more difficult for the Labyrinth deck to play through. The main thing you care about is how am I outing a Borderland Dragon. Can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, and you can't target this card. So with monster effects, sorry. So actually you can out it with like a Compulse. You can out it with any trap, as long as it's not destroying it. That's an easy out. So you can definitely deal with Dragon Link probably a little bit easier just because their boss monsters are easier to deal with. We look at Sprite, which again I said many times is the best deck of the format. This is why I think I would want to main deck one deck Devi, because while it's useless against most other decks, it does beat Floowandereeze. 100% it beats Floowandereeze, and it beats Sprite for sure as well. Sprite might have a hard time playing against a good Labyrinth player, because if the good Labyrinth player times their interruptions well, they know to wait till you commit resources into the extra deck monsters to, let's say, Tears of the Overroot, Compulse, etc. They're not going to be, you know, shotgunning, you summon blue, they're going to chain their trap right away. They're going to wait for you to commit to plays, and then you're going to just be behind in the resource game. Sprite is strong because it can play through multiple interruptions, but when those interruptions are dedicated interruptions to disrupt monsters, like with Labyrinth, it's a lot harder, right? Because you're going to have to deal with a lot of them. It's not like you're playing against a regular deck where you get Ash, you can play through it, you get Impermed, you can play through it. You're dealing with things that like specifically out monsters, not generic overall negates, right? It's very hard for you to play through a Compulse when you just committed to a Gigantic, and then you have no additional follow-up. Whereas if the Gigantic gets Ash, at least you still have the body on board, you can maybe extend from there, right? So those are the differences that you might have to deal with when you're going up against Labyrinth. Aside from that, I don't think there's really too much else to go over. But Labyrinth will be a force. It's not by any means an all-powerful deck. Even when it came to Master Duel, before it got the power cards, it was a good deck, it was an interesting deck, it was a fun deck, but it had its deficiencies. If you don't get your engine rolling, you fall behind an advantage very, very quickly, and the game is pretty much a wrap, right? Trap decks in a best-of-1 format, you're very heavily favored going first, but you're very heavily disadvantaged going second. That's why I think playing things like Board Breakers might be the way to go, because if you can just out the opponent's monsters and then just set up your traps, you know, Lava Golem, set 3, set 4, set 5, go ahead, you pretty much win the game, right, at that point. So take it with a grain of salt. Let me know what you're doing in the comment section below. Will I switch over to Labyrinth? It has a lot of similarities that I like about it to Floowandereeze, mainly the fact that it doesn't play into Max C. So yeah, I might try it, but I think I'm more comfortable with Floowandereeze. Obviously, I know the interactions a lot more, whereas with Labyrinth, you're going to have to really make sure you understand how the deck plays in order to play it well. That's going to go ahead and, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video there. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. A like would be appreciated. And let me know in the comment section if you are interested in seeing Labyrinth or if you're going to be playing it yourself. That's it for now, though. Quantum is out.